the 26th of August 2013, the eve of the third anniversary of the promulgation of Kenya's new constitution. And tonight we shall be taking stock of how far the country has come.
But it's also a day when we here at KTN begin a special coverage of the menace that is elephant poaching. Good evening and welcome. I'm James Smart.
And I'm Linda Gutu, live from KTN News Center here on Mombasa Road. But we're also live at the Nairobi National Park, the site of the 1989 ivory burning exercise that drew the world's attention to poaching. Let's bring in Rita Tinina. Rita, what can we expect from there?
Well, Linda, as you mentioned, this park has great significance to the fight against poaching. We shall be giving you the facts and figures, as well as an interview with the experts on what needs to be done. From the coast, Ferdinand Omondi will be giving us a slightly different perspective. Ferdi, that is where most of the illegal ivory passes through. What can we expect in your report tonight, Ferdi?
Well, here from Mombasa, I will tell you why the tour operators, the hoteliers, complete with their sandy beaches, are fretting over the declining population of elephants in our parks. And I'll tell you how that is related to the trade here. But that's for later. Now, back to Nairobi.
Very well, Ferdinand, and back here in Nairobi, we're looking at theft of a different kind, that of fuel. And we have received reactions from the police service concerning an expose we aired on siphoning of fuel in Langata. But first, let's look at the highlights with James Smart and Linda Ogutu.
Eyewitnesses have their own issues. Some of them may be threatened. Some of them may be induced.
Who killed Sheikh Abu Drogo? Probe team fails to identify culprits.
No trial in Kenya or Arusha. ICC judges reject Ruto's plea.
We started investigations based on that particular information.
Plus, saving the elephant, fueling cartels. Police promise action following KTN's expose.
Many thanks for joining us on KTN Prime. We begin here in Nairobi, where a team investigating the controversial murder of Muslim cleric Abu Drogo has failed to identify his killers.
Where the probe team is now calling for a public inquest into the killing that angered human rights activists.
The government report comes on the eve of the first anniversary of Rogo's killing. But as KTN's John Alanamu now reports, the findings have raised a whole new range of questions about Rogo's killing.
It's been 364 days since a series of events kicked off by the cold-blooded, broad daylight murder of Sheikh Rogo rocked Mombasa. Sheikh Abu Drogo's family will be commemorating 1 year since the murder of their patriarch, only they're not any closer to finding out who was bold enough to gun him down at 11:30 in the morning. About a month after the inter-agency task force formed to investigate his death and the subsequent violent riots was formed, this is what its chairman, Jason Ondari, said.
We have encountered some challenges, and we still require further information from members of the public to assist in the investigation.
Fast forward to today, and this is what he said.
We have descriptions of the people who killed Sheikh Abu Drogo, but we have not had the opportunity to fix this description to a particular person.
This after the releasing of the committee's report on the death of Sheikh Rogo, a 71-page document of which 24 pages are introductions, annexes, and background. The witness accounts deliver nothing new. The one-star witness, named W7 in the report, who was in a matatu driving behind Rogo's vehicle when the attack took place, narrated to them how a white Subaru with no number plate pulled up to the side of the vehicle. An assailant climbed out of the passenger side window and opened fire. What the report does go into great detail describing is just how little was done. Add up the numbers and you get the sum total of a breathtaking effort to avoid investigations. First, of all the 6 occupants of the car who survived the attack, only 1 has recorded a statement. 13 out of the 14 people in a matatu following Rogo's vehicle have not recorded statements. 16 spent cartridges were recovered from the scene and taken for ballistics. To date, no ballistics report has been availed to the task force or to the public. 2 teams investigating the murder were unable to agree on whether there were witnesses or not. It took 7 days before any officer went looking into Rogo's minivan for clues. When gunshots were fired, the OCS of Bamburi police station couldn't walk 200 meters to investigate why over 16 shots would be fired literally outside his station. And police headquarters did not respond to one letter written on the 20th of December 2012 that poked all of these holes. That adds up to 244 reasons why nobody to date knows who killed Sheikh Rogo. Subtract that from the 1 death and millions of losses incurred after the riots in reaction to Rogo's death, and this statement from the Director of Public Prosecutions, Keriako Tobiko.
We rely on eyewitnesses. Eyewitnesses have their own issues. Some of them may be threatened.
And you have a huge deficit in reasoning as to why the police won't investigate Rogo's murder. The elephant in the room, though, is whether Rogo was executed by officers from the Anti-Terrorism Police Unit, a long-held allegation by the numerous people who refused to give testimony to the task force. After an investigation that took 4 months, this week, KTN's Jicho Pevu, an Inside Story investigative series, will look into the fault lines in the war on terror, and the chapter on Aboud Rogo will be longer than that of the task force. John Alanamu, KTN.
All right, in The Hague, judges have rejected an application by Deputy President William Ruto to have his case heard either in Kenya or Tanzania.
That means Ruto and radio journalist Joshua Arap Sang will now have to face their trial in The Hague.
Well, and as Wilson Buru now reports, this is not the only setback for the 2 defense teams ahead of the start of the trials.
Criminal court is now in.
Only last week, the ICC ordered Deputy President William Ruto to be present during all sessions of his trial, pending an appeal he lodged before the court. And now, judges at the Hague-based court have handed him yet another blow by rejecting his request to transfer the proceedings of his case and that of Joshua Arap Sang to Kenya or Tanzania. This came after the judges failed to reach the required 2/3 majority necessary for a decision to change the seat of the court. ICC President Judge Sang Hyun Song explained that all considerations had been made, including factors such as security and the cost of holding proceedings outside The Hague. Hyun Song says the judges also considered the potential impact on the perception of the court and on the court's ability to conduct and support other proceedings taking place simultaneously. But in what may be seen as a flicker of light in a dark tunnel, Ruto's request to have breaks between each session of a similar duration may be granted after ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda welcomed the request, albeit with amendments. Bensouda suggested that the breaks be at 3 weeks intervals and should not start before witnesses who are on the stand have completed their testimony or cross-examination. She explains that this will ensure that the witnesses are not forced to be away from their families for lengthy periods. Ruto's case is set to start on 10th of September, during which the prosecution as well as the victims and the defense will each have 2 hours for the opening statements. As for the presentation of evidence, the prosecution indicated that it will require 300 hours to cross-examine 40 witnesses, but this does not include the time for counter-examination of witnesses for the defense team. Wilson Buru, KTN Prime.
You're watching KTN Prime, and we thank you for staying with us. Now, yesterday we brought you an exclusive story on the activities of men constructing roads in Nairobi that could be part of a cartel that has been siphoning fuel from contractors. That story was brought to you by KTN's Asha Mwelu. Tonight we have a reaction from the police following the coverage of that story. Asha, what sort of reaction are we looking at?
Well, Linda, you know, that story did spark some reaction from members of the public, the online community, especially on social network pages such as Twitter and Facebook, did go on a frenzy just commenting on that story. And now it's not just members of the public reacting. The police service has now pledged to take action against the construction drivers, the fuel cartel, and some police officers that were nabbed by our cameras siphoning fuel from a contractor that was constructing the Nairobi Southern bypass. Linda, take a watch at this story that we filed earlier on. The images of the men siphoning fuel from construction trucks aired on KTN sent Nairobi's Langata area into a frenzy. By Monday morning, this small container was the sole piece of evidence remaining here. The police raid was, however, too late as the cartel had already fled and the site was deserted.
Immediately we saw the news, we mounted an operation and we were able to recover 200 liters of diesel and empty containers. So we have started investigations based on that particular information.
Vigilance House, however, was more concerned about the police officers caught red-handed conspiring with the fuel cartel. The exclusive expose aired on KTN Sunday night revealed the insider dealings of the construction sector, where drivers work with a ring of crooks to siphon fuel. Police officers were also seen to be a part of the illegal dealings.
We are able to see the police officer, and this officer belongs to the Kenya Police, the way he is dressed, and we can see a vehicle there. We'll be able to identify the officer and to know what he had gone to do there in our investigations.
I had not received any information prior to this until yesterday when I saw it in the media, but it seems as if the drivers were aware about what was going on. That is the reason why we are going to take disciplinary action against the drivers.
Just last month, Inspector General of Police David Kimayo issued a stern warning to rogue police officers involved in corrupt activities. This warning, however, seems to have fallen on deaf ears. While he confirmed his ownership of the illegal business, the head of the siphoning cartel is still at large. Na hii biashara unajua ni kwamba ni illegal?
Not illegal, it's a legal business. Buying and selling from a willing buyer, willing seller business.
But sir, you're siphoning fuel that belongs to someone else.
Who?
The contractors that are constructing the Southern bypass.
Nani alikuambia hivyo?
Tuko na picha ya kuprove.
It's okay, isn't shida.
The contractor of the Southern bypass has confirmed that the trucks exposed by KTN indeed belong to his company. He says the company is still deliberating on what action to take against the drivers involved. Ashamwilu, KTN, Nairobi.
Ashamwilu, many thanks for that. Of course, we have been speaking to Ashamwilu from our town office, and she was looking at the reaction of an exclusive story that was carried yesterday by KTN. Let's move on now. And the Judicial Service Commission has snubbed the summons by a parliamentary committee probing its decision to send Chief Registrar Gladys Sholei on compulsory leave. After meeting for close to 6 hours, the JSC resolved to steer clear of the probe by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. The Commission argues that appearing before Parliament would amount to allowing the committee to interfere with an independent institution. The Parliamentary Committee had summoned the JSC to examine its members on corruption allegations against Sholei.
I said, dear Joseph, this is Gladys Sholei, Chief Registrar of the Judiciary. I have been chairperson and members. Very aware of Article 172 that gives the power.
Association with Nguvu Cement.
All right, so the Judicial Service Commission has snubbed the summons by a parliamentary committee probing its decision to send Chief Registrar Gladys Sholei on compulsory leave. That forms the basis of a big question tonight, and we're asking you, do you support JSC's decision to snub summons by Parliament? Do you support JSC's decision to snub call by Parliament? Send a yes or no response, of course, with a brief comment to the number 8040. You can tweet us at KTN Kenya, at Linda Oguto, or at James Smart. We will be able to sample your views at the tail end of this bulletin.
Choose Nguvu for undoubted strength.
All right, now to this special coverage that has made us even sing on Twitter asking why are we donning these armbands, and this is for this reason. And tonight we're wearing these armbands for that cause, for the elephants. Hands off our elephants. My colleague Rita Tinina, as we informed you earlier on, she's at the National Park. Rita, tonight we begin this special coverage of Hands Off Our Elephant. What can you tell us, Rita?
Well, James, we are indeed coming to you live from the ivory burning site. This is a sport where more than 2 decades ago, Kenya made that symbolic statement in the fight against poaching. But 24 years later, the problem is still alive. Take a look.
Across the country, the world's largest land mammal still survives, even with diminishing habitat. But now, a threat far more deadly looms large: the illegal trade in ivory that shows no signs of diminishing. Unprecedented poaching levels in the 70s and 80s saw Kenya's elephant numbers plummet from an estimated 160,000 to just 16,000. Kenya took the first step in the fight against poaching on the 18th of July 1989, when the then President Daniel Moi set ablaze 12 tons of ivory in a gesture to persuade the world to end ivory trade. The world seems to have listened. In the same year, the UN body that regulates trade in endangered species, CITES, approved a worldwide ban on ivory.
That brought the price down immediately.
From the near decimation of the Kenyan elephant, the country has over the years managed to stabilize the elephant population with an estimated just over 30,000 jumbos said to be roaming the wild. In 2011, Kenya sent another message to the world with the banning of 5 tons of ivory. But conservationists warn that all the gains made so far could soon be lost.
It is a national crisis. It threatens our economy, it threatens our heritage, and it threatens our future aspirations.
Poaching levels have gone wild again. Kenya has been named by CITES as among the gang of 8 countries that keep the trade in ivory flourishing. Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania are listed as source countries. Malaysia, Vietnam and the Philippines are transit countries, while China and Thailand are destination countries.
The demand has never been this great in the history of mankind. China allows legal trade in ivory, and illegal ivory is entering the market and being laundered.
Easy access to weapons by poaching guns and the ability of kingpins in the illegal trade to keep their tracks covered has kept the illegal trade booming.
People are being corrupted throughout the entire chain, from rangers to customs officials, traffic police, the ports authorities, whether it's our seaport or our airports.
Weak penalties and non-custodial sentences handed to poachers have also been blamed for the illegal trade.
Until recently, there were no custodial sentences being passed, which was sending a message to the poachers and dealers that it's okay, because even if you get caught, you're only going to get a small fine.
What we're proposing at the moment is that the minimum fine is 10 million shillings. And the minimum sentencing is 15 years.
Last week's sentencing of a Chinese ivory smuggler to 2.5 years in prison was a one-of-a-kind ruling hailed by conservationists as a step in the right direction. But many argue that winning the war will take more than just stiffer penalties.
We want them to ban those domestic markets for ivory into perpetuity.
In 1997, CITES allowed a one-off sale of ivory. In 2007, a similar sale was sanctioned. Conservationists argue that such sales lead to an upsurge in poaching and are now pushing for nothing less than a total ban on ivory trade.
For more insight on the poaching menace and the illegal trade in ivory, we shall be speaking to later in this bulletin to Patrick Omondi. He is the Deputy Director in charge of Wildlife Conservation here at KWS. But for now, the poaching menace and the illegal trade in ivory is not just a concern for conservationists. Tourists too are worried. From Mombasa, we can now cross over live to Ferdinand Omondi for that perspective. Ferdi.
Well, the elephant is one of those animals that make the big five, and Kenya is one of only 5, 6 or 7 countries that can offer that experience in their natural habitat. That makes the elephant a very important cog in the engine that fuels Kenya's tourism industry, which is Kenya's second highest foreign exchange earner. However, the population of the elephant has been declining very worryingly in the recent times, and that has tourism players, even here in the coast region, who have their sandy beaches worried, and this is why. Stacks of ivory impounded at the port of Mombasa. Every pair once belonged to an animal that makes the big five, the magnificent elephant. The sheer amount of the collection impounded regularly is a grim reminder of the growing ivory trade. And at the coast, the Kenya's tourism industry is alarmed.
Let me put it this way. The Kenya coast is purely riding on the goodwill of wildlife. We are piggy riding, we are actually taking advantage of the wildlife. Without wildlife, will be nothing.
Kenya is one of only 6 or 7 countries that boast the availability of the big five in their natural setting. That is the elephant, the rhino, lion, leopard, and the buffalo. This has always given Kenya's hoteliers along the sandy beaches a unique selling point.
Wildlife becomes the puller. So you're going to Kenya to see wildlife, and then by extension, after you're doing your safari and you're tired and you want to relax, instead of going to another country, then you can come to the Kenya coast. That's how it works.
But that selling point is now under threat. The population of the African elephant has drastically reduced over the years. Government figures estimate that poachers killed 384 elephants in 2012, and this year 183 elephants had been slaughtered by July. The First Lady described this as a recipe for instability and poverty. Hoteliers couldn't agree more.
It directly impacts on us because then the tourism numbers go down, or the tourists come very concerned about what safari experience they're going to have in Kenya. And of course, tourism is very competitive within the region. Therefore, it doesn't reflect very, very well.
Specialists estimate that if this decline goes on unchecked, then elephants will be extinct in 15 years. Unfortunately, poachers target not just elephants. Kenya's lion and rhino are also very endangered.
So the moment you lose your wildlife, it means you know how to fight it out as a beach destination with 41 other countries. Sri Lanka, Thailand, Hawaii, all these beautiful Caribbean countries would now be, including Dubai, which gives you shopping in return. Now, will we be able to compete with these other destinations when it comes to beach? Certainly not.
The biggest culprit in the thriving ivory trade is Kenya's new best friend, China, which has received a lot of flack for funding illegal ivory trade. Leaked internal Chinese documents have shown how 121 tons of ivory from its own official stockpile could not be accounted for. This is equivalent to the tusks from 11,000 elephants. This high demand is due to a widespread belief in the Far East that ivory from the elephant and rhino has medicinal value and an aphrodisiac. China has recently agreed to help Kenya fight poaching, but tourism players are guarded in their optimism. The demand is to see as much commitment as the country has given to drug trade.
Because they execute drug dealers. They actually execute the corrupt in China. So the same should apply, so that this person does not have a chance to repeat the act again.
The Hands Off Our Elephants campaign is aimed at stopping the poaching of the elephants, but keeping big ears alive is not just about conservation.
Kenya is one of the few countries that actually has its natural resources as a tourist attraction. It's everyone's responsibility to make sure that we keep our heritage.
The iconic elephant tusks are to Mombasa what the KICC is to Nairobi, or what the Eiffel Tower is to Paris, France. And if we can't get the poachers and ivory traders to keep their hands off our elephants, then soon the elephants will go the way of the mammoth, and all we'll have left are symbols like this to remind us how the lovely elephant once might have looked like. Ferdinand Mundi, KTN, Mombasa.
Ferdinand Omondi there reporting from Mombasa. From the ivory banning side, we are now joined by Patrick Omondi. He is the Deputy Director in charge of Wildlife Conservation at KWS. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Rita.
In the 1970s and 80s, of course, we saw near decimation of elephants. This time round, how serious is the problem?
Yes, indeed. The 70s and 80s, we lost over 80% of the country's population. From 167,000, our population was reduced to 16,000 by the time we banned our ivory in this monument. The ban in international trade in ivory reduced that pressure because the price in ivory reduced significantly. But the experiment to lift the ban in 1997 and in 2007 introduced the pressure on poaching and also the smuggling in illegal ivory across the globe. So the pressure we are witnessing today in Kenya is happening across the continent. It's not as bad as the 70s and 80s, but is bad across the continent, with Central Africa being the most affected.
Kenya, of course, has been named among the Gang of 8 countries as a source country. Recently, we have seen tons of ivory being seized at the port of Mombasa. Are we able to tell of that ivory how much is from Kenya, how much is on transit?
Yes, we are in the process of doing a DNA profiling of all the seized ivory since 2001. There are about 12 tons of ivory that have been seized since that time. The analysis will be able to tell us where the ivory originated from so that we are able to identify the crime chain. But we are more or less certain, over 90% certain, that most of this ivory is from Central Africa, because poaching has been over 80% happening in Central Africa, followed by West Africa, then Eastern and Southern Africa. Yes, we should be able to establish the source of this ivory. And I want to reiterate that one of the reasons Kenya was put among the Gang of 8 is because we had weak penalties. It was easier to pass through Jomo Kenyatta and Mombasa port. And because our penalties are weak, these criminals preferred using those ports. And that is why we were placed among a Gang of 8 alongside Tanzania and Uganda, and as source countries, and then Malaysia, Vietnam, and Philippines as transit countries. But the main problem is with the consumer states, China and Thailand.
Speaking of China,
yes.
As the biggest market for ivory,
yeah.
What do you think needs to be done to China? Some have argued that if there is no demand, if there is no market, then elephants will be safe.
That is rightly so, because ivory is not medicine. What ivory is being used for is cosmetic. People use it for rubber stamp, just for status. Necklaces, you kill a 7-ton animal just to make a necklace. So if China banned today the use of ivory in China because it's not medicine, we should be able to resolve the problem of poaching across the continent of Africa. So I think most of the advocacy should be for our colleagues in China to stop the use of ivory. And if that is stopped, then the prices for ivory will significantly reduce, and we will see these elephants survive in generations to come.
In the fight against poaching, stakeholders are of course looking to the wildlife bill, which proposes stiffer penalties. There are also calls for greater international cooperation with all the countries involved in the illegal trade in ivory. What assurance can you give perhaps to Kenyans that years from now, generations to come, will be able to see the elephants, that the elephant is safe?
I want to assure Kenyans that Kenyan's elephants are safe, they are healthy. Majority of it are growing at a rate of between 2 and 4%. Kenya currently have 30,000 elephants from 16,000 in 1990 when the international ban became in force. 30,000 is the 4th largest population in the world. And we see with the support of the government, from His Excellency the President, for the first time from His Excellency to the Cabinet Secretary, the entire systems of government have put effort in anti-poaching operation. All the relevant government arms are working together, and we are seeing our elephants being safe. We do not want to see elephant get extinct under the watch of Kenya Wildlife Service. So for Kenyans, Kenyan's elephant population is safe. We have 30,000 elephants, and we want to call all Kenyans. These criminals are giving us a hard time, but our people, our rangers, even as we speak here, we have men and women patrolling Nairobi Park, and they are patrolling all over. So with the support of Kenyans, we should be able to see our elephants grow and thrive for the generations to come. And we'll also want the international support. That's why we are working with our partners. And the campaigns that are going on should be focused on doing demand reduction. If we can stop the consumers from using ivory, then the demand will be reduced, the prices will go down, nobody will be killing elephants across the range in Africa.
Thank you so much. Of course, an assurance from KWS there. And in the coming 2 days, we at KTN are, of course, keeping the spotlight on the elephants. But for now, from the ivory banning site, I hand things back to Linda and Smart in studio.
And Editor, many thanks for that Hands of Elephants as our focus tonight. This has been a major focus even for the First Lady of the country, and at the official launch of Hands of Elephants campaign, Her Excellency Margaret Kenyatta said the statistics are alarming. Currently, our elephant population in Kenya has reduced to stand at approximately 30,000. Not only that, around 183 elephants have been slaughtered this year. That's how bad it is. That is why a lot of Kenyans would not want to see this next story, where a public health officer has been arrested with 17 pieces of elephant tusks valued at more than 800,000 shillings.
Well, Michael Kialo, who's the Mwingi East District Public Officer, appeared in court earlier today to answer to charges of illegal possession of 42 kilograms of ivory.
The 39-year-old officer is alleged to have committed the offense in Kua, location of Machakos County, over the weekend.
He's also accused of failing to report to wildlife authorities of having the elephant trophies, and that he dealt with ivory without the dealer's license.
He was released on a 500,000 shilling bond until October 17th, when hearing of the case is set to begin.
The Big Q, in association with Nguvu Cement.
All right, the time for that reminder of a big question, and we get it from that story from the JSC that today has said that it will not honor the summons from Parliament. And we ask you tonight, do you support JSC's decision to snub summons by Parliament?
So there's no response, of course, to the brief comment to the number 8040, Twitters at KTN Kenya, at James Smart, at Linda Gutu, and we will sample some of your opinions during this newscast.